You are listening to Accents, a radio show for literature, art, and culture. I am your host, Katerina Stoikova, and my guest today is Jennifer Litt. Hi, Jennifer, how are you?
Hi, Katerina. I'm wonderful. Thank you for asking.
Jennifer Litt is the author of the chapbook Maximum Speed Through Zero, published in 2016 by Matthew Silverman's Blue Lyra Press. She is assistant director of the Palm Beach Poetry Festival and lives in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. And I know that Jennifer hasn't always lived in Florida. When we started, when we got in contact and became friends, she was in Rochester, New York, right?
Yes, I lived in Rochester for 27 years. I mean, I'm a New Englander by birth. I lived in Miami for 7 years in the 80s, and then I moved to Rochester for love. And I moved here in 2017. So yeah, a new life in Fort Lauderdale.
I used to live in Rochester too. Our listeners have never heard that. I lived there for a couple of years and I went to school. I went to RIT. That was part of my life as a software engineer.
I was an adjunct at RIT. I taught composition, how to write well persuasively to students. And I really enjoyed being on that campus. There are some really brilliant young people at that school.
Totally.
I'm sure you were one of them.
Thank you. And how long have you been writing?
You know, I've been writing for a long time because I was an English teacher first, and even though it was more teaching literature and not so much writing, it's a gradual thing because have been such an avid reader. It just started to spill out onto the page. And I think that may be true for many writers. They start off as avid readers, and you know, I had more to express than I could just do through teaching, so.
And what genres do you work in? I know about the poetry.
Right. I actually used to write more fiction. I love writing fiction. I have to laugh though, because I think I've always been quite lyrical in my writing and poetic. And my mother, who was a big fan of Lucille Clifton's, told me, I think you should write poetry. And another writer who was kind of a mentor to me, David Bradley, who is a fiction writer, he said, you need to write poetry. So, but again, it was more of an informal movement toward that. And I've been taking little boot camp classes and things like that for years with other poets, and that really set me on my path. Particularly generative exercises in boot camp. Some people don't really like to receive generative exercises, but I'm always rehearsing something in my head to write. I've always got an idea, and if you can connect that idea to the exercise, it's like, boom, sometimes there's magic there. So a lot of my poems, ones that, you know, end up being published, have come from those types of activities. So yay for boot camps.
I don't think I've ever taken a poetry boot camp like that. I might do it in the future now after I've heard your endorsement. It makes a lot of sense, yeah.
It does. Sarah Freely is the queen of boot camps. She started them, and we used to go out to a friend's house in Skinny Atlas on the lake, and we'd stay there for the weekend, and we'd have these wonderful, quiet settings in which to write our exercises, which were always timed, by the way. That I really think that makes a difference. It would be like we'd have 12 or 13 minutes, and then you were done. And some of us, we couldn't believe what would come out of us in that amount of time. Not every exercise works that way, but you know, one or two, and you're like, wow, this is just amazing. And then we share in a very constructive way, because it's not the point for real critique. It's a point for just kind of validation of having put something down on paper.
So the intermittent reinforcement, sometimes I write something that I like and sometimes something good comes out. I'm going to do another boot camp, right?
Right. So although we do write in isolation, it's always important to have a community of writers that you work with. And I've been lucky that wherever I've lived, I've managed to find a really supportive community of writers, both fiction and poetry.
Well, let's speak about that, because you are, as I said, the assistant director of the Palm Beach Poetry Festival. And what is the influence on the festival of the writing community there, and what can we expect this year, and whatever you want to share?
Well, there are many local writers in Florida. We have performance poetry of the Palm Beaches, and there's South Florida Poetry Journal, which is edited by Lenny De La Roca and Michael Macklin O'Hara. So they're kind of the, I don't know, the glue in the South Florida area. And then there's Swim and the Betsy Hotel in Miami. So, and all of these individuals are connected in many ways. There's Oh Miami with Scott Cunningham. So there is a very powerful, talented poetry community. And all of those individuals have been a part of the Poetry Festival in one way or the other, not just attending craft talks or readings, but attending workshops, facilitating panels for us. So that's really always been a joy. Jen Koretnik, she facilitated our Beloved Poems panel this past January. She's very entertaining. So that part is terrific. But being the assistant director and working with my boss, Susan Williamson, to prepare and market our poets, it's almost like a craft extravaganza every week. I have to do my due diligence, do the read interviews with the poets, and look at their work more extensively. So this year we're going virtual, and we're a little terrified because it's a very new norm for us, and it's not normal.
Right.
Not a norm. And we're working on, reconceptualizing the festival. But what's wonderful is that we still have these fantastic poets. We have David Baker teaching, and he's a wonderful writer, especially in the area of being nature oriented in his writing. It's beautiful writing. We have Eduardo C. Corral this year, and his book Guillotine was just longlisted for the National Book Award. I find him fascinating. He's a wonderful poet, and some of the things that he says I really like about writing. He said, begin with a morsel of sensory detail. He says, subject matter is secondary and language is king, he said. Mm-hmm. And so he says, follow the language and the music. And what I love the most, and what I'm found, I take all my cues from them. I read them and go, okay, make a mess and then finesse it. I like that. I like having permission to make a mess and then finesse it.
Sounds great too. Make a mess and then finesse it. Here, I'm writing that down.
Perhaps to me, we have Vivi Francis, who is just a master poet and teacher, and we're really looking forward to having her at the festival. We had Matthew Olsman a couple of years ago, her husband. He's a truly wonderful poet and teacher as well. One of the things that Vivi says that I really was thinking about very carefully when I'm asked about my own writing. She said, to write is to speak and to give voice to what would be unknown, perhaps even to the self, without writing it. So
Yeah.
so it is an exploration, and she's also very sensitive to stopping in its tracks, receiving the received narrative. It's like, don't have any expectations or stereotypes or anything about what I'm going to write. And so she's in a way very freeing and liberating to me as a poet. So I learned something new from every poet. And without going into, belaboring it, we also have Tracy Brimhall, who is a creative, exuberant poet, an amazing teacher. We have Tim Siebels, we have Martha Rhodes this year, and we have Kevin Proofer. And so those are our teaching poets this year. I don't think I left anybody out. Well, Laurent Beausolar, of course. She's the mother, in a way, of our program, because she's been with the program for a very long time, because Tom Lux is the one who helped Miles Kuhn found the festival. And since Tom passed, she has pretty much kind of taken his place. So she's an important member of the faculty, like a permanent member of our faculty. And as far as our poet at large, we have Ryan Turner, soldier poet, and he's an extraordinary musician too. We're still trying to figure out what's happening in the schools, because the schools are still trying to figure out what's happening in the schools. And then we have Gregory Orr coming, Zooming with the Parkington sisters. So he's doing a cycle of beloved cycle of poems and music. So, I mean, it's exciting, and we just want to make sure we present it in a way that's still of the highest quality, because people love to travel to Delray Beach. It's a cute place, it's warm, it's the beach, it's a whole experiential thing. So it is a little bit different. I think having like a Palm Beach, having a palm tree in the background on the Zoom screen might not cut it as walking to the beach would, but we're going to try our best.
Sounds exciting, sounds like a wonderful lineup. And what I have, although it's not the same on the literary events that I've attended and the festivals, people have been no less excited about poetry and about literature and about making contacts with one another. So good luck with the festival. Now, however, I want to get back to you and to your work. And what have you been writing these days? This month?
Actually, been taking an online poetry workshop with Martha Rhodes. And I must say, this community writers, because of Zoom, they're all over the country. We have been writing ourselves through the pandemic. I swear it's been so refreshing and regenerating, and we've made friendships. Like, we're so close, even for Zoom. Mm-hmm. And Martha has us doing the most wonderful things. First of all, she asks us to try out different forms, and whether it's a triolet or a hustle, and that is always so much fun, but we always learn so much. And she's always given us opportunities to break the form too. So that is really enjoyable. When we just choose, and we can choose our own work to be critiqued. She requires us to talk about the other poets' strategies for the poem, which is such a valuable type of exercise for someone like me. She has us memorize the poem. She would prefer it if we'd memorize a poem of one of the classics or even the masters. I mean, I usually go for William Butler Yeats, but then we read for each other, we recite to each other, and then we talk about the strategies of the poet. So I really feel like I'm learning a lot. And we also had Dan Tobin come on and lecture to us about Robert Hayden's collected poems. We read them and had identified certain poems for discussion. So that has been a joy, an ongoing joy every Tuesday night. So I really love that. Martha's a fabulous teacher. Martha's really funny. Martha will have, I love it, especially when she takes your poem and tells you, well, cut off this. And I worked with her in 2015 on a poem, and it ended up, and it's going to be in my my new book, and it's like a 3-line poem. And started out much longer. So I love getting input from all different types of persons, because I tend to be more narrative poet. I think I'm a narrative lyric poet, but I really enjoy people who have a different approach to writing poetry. I think it benefits me as a writer. It makes me stretch myself.
And Jennifer, you mentioned a new book. Tell us more.
The book is called Strictly from Hunger. And that is an idiom that appeals to me on so many levels, but mostly because it's one of the expressions that my parents used to use. And it can have negative connotations, but mostly I just like to think of it as things that, for example, empty, foolish, or inept to an astonishing degree. And if you apply that to relationships, because my book is about family and friends and love and how we mess up a lot, you know? And also because I love expressions, it's it also means of poor quality, or it means corny. So it's really kind of opens the imagination to hunger beyond just hunger for food. It's a desire for things. It's that id inside of all of us, you know, that tries to take on a more integrated ego form in real life. But you know, it's just wonderful to kind of write from the heart, make a mess, and then finesse. And I chose that title because I just think it has so many applications to.
Yeah, it's a fantastic title. Yeah.
So yeah. So that's the title. I mean, there are funny things like my father always used to say, that's for the birds. So I have that expression in one of my poems. They're like so funny. They're old-fashioned expressions, but they never lose their value or their meaning in writing. I just, you know, my father was like, we go out and get in the car and go for a ride, all of us, and he'd be like, and we're off like a herd of wild turtles. Just like, I'm like, now that's pretty corny, but it's pretty funny too.
and you know, there is nothing like real life as source for literature, you know, because a lot of it, you cannot make up that stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
My father was always considered a ham and egger, which is kind of another name for a person who can be corny with his joke telling. So. And I think it's really funny too to address, like, I do include my sister, the sister filtered through my imagination in the book, because she's so opposite from the speaker in the book. And that is really, really pretty funny, because she's like the anti-poetry person. So that I find, you know, great humor in for me. So I just like to explore those ideas and those feelings and behaviors.
I would love for you to read some poems for us.
I would love to read some poems. I'm going to read, I selected a few poems that are more about my father. I guess I gave you a little intro to my father there. I mean, there are so many other themes of femininity and feminism and mother, son, and so forth, but I'm in the mood for my father today, so. Okay, the first poem I'm going to read is The Great Fire of February 1928. And before I begin, I just want any listeners to understand that in this poem, the word salamander not only means an amphibian, it also is a portable heater. And that's important to know for the fire. The Great Fire of February 1928. Point of origin, the salamander. Its spark, swept by a cold wind from Mount Hope Bay up Pocasset Street, feeds the oil-soaked floor of the windowless mill, leaps from hotel to theater to synagogue to granite block, and devours Fall River's heart in the 8 hours crews take to smother it. Eye of newt added to the witch's cauldron first, fiery spice of mustard seed to lace the curse, for a charm of powerful trouble like a hell broth boil and bubble. Dad, you inhale the amphibious fumes. Your mother holds your hand, feels your spark, and holds it tighter. You're only 6, but she sees the flames in your eyes, knows you'll slay fires with your father's kind. Does she sense you're a survivor? Together, you witness the city burn. She carries your brother in utero, harbors no inkling of her death during childbirth come October. How you'll hold your brother's hand to cross the street. At the New Bedford Whaling Museum. I found my father a wheelchair. The footrest had dropsy. Every time we crossed a threshold into another room, his right foot, missing its baby toe, scraped the floor. We surveyed the giant skeletons of whale, sperm, humpback, blue, suspended from the atrium ceiling. Below us, the staff set up tables and chairs for a wedding reception. When Dad saw the female right whale with fetus, he whispered, "Your mother had a miscarriage when we were first married." Later, he lifted an exhibit phone to listen to a whale song. "You know Tony Bennett," he yelled into the handset. This poem is "One by One They Drop Away," which is an excerpt, a line from the poem by Yeats, "The Old Men Admiring Themselves in the Water." My mother's gone, my father's heart a destroyer torpedoed at sea. His plural cavern floods with fiery debris. O Portunus, turn your dolphin toward the harbor. Come to this sailor's aid. Provide him safe passage for what I believe is this, my father's becoming a fish. Sea Hunt. My father's been confused a time or two for Lloyd Bridges, the TV frogman from Sea Hunt, that ancient series, who sets out on rescue missions from his ship, the Argonaut, an old salt like me mistaken for a star. He's turning into a starfish, not a fish, easy to confuse. Fish, starfish, echinoderm. Better to call him a sea star with his red and orange shirts, his armor of prickly skin. My father eats crab cakes, drinks beer, jokes about his pedicure, one of the spa services my sister treats him to every other month. My daughter deserves a 10% discount, he tells the salon owner, because I only have 9 toes. The surgeon chopped one off. He settles back on the couch and drifts, but he isn't asleep. He's had a stroke. His lungs are filling up with fluid now, and no one can save him from this drowning. Seawater's replacing his air. My father's a star, a sea star, returning to the deep to restore his toe to be whole. How to stop missing my father. Remember how everyone called him Red for more than his shock of hair? A hothead in love with blazing fires, the ones he started and the ones he fought. Remember how he drove me from Florida to the Finger Lakes, where love had decided I'd move? If you like red barns, he said, it's a great place to live. How every red barn since announces itself like a flaming leaf in fall. I have one more poem, and it's about fathers, and fire, but it's not about my father. So I thought I'd end with that one. And this also came from an exercise to choose a poem that you like, choose a phrase from it to use as the title, and choose 5 or 6 words from it and create a new poem. And I used When You Are Old by Yeats for this. And it's called And Bending Down Beside the Glowing Bars of a Wildfire Barely Contained, the rescuer lifts the border collie dying in the shadows, takes her in his arms, murmurs a prayer of grace and sorrow, her final moments unwitnessed by the ash-covered stars. Later, he will pace the control line, an expectant father in a smoke-filled dream. So that's what I had today.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. These are lovely. Good luck to you and your writing and your book and the festival. And stay healthy. Thank you so much for coming on Accents.
Thank you very much for having me.
Okay,
Wonderful.
talk to you soon.
Thank you.